Imagine you're a sailor before there was a map or compass or anything. You just sailed away and hoped for the best. You didn't know what the future would bring. Landing in difficult middle game structures, difficult pawn structures, can be a little bit like that. You basically don't know what you're doing. And today we're going to see a great game played recently in the match between David Howell and the Swedish player Nils Grandelius, who lives in Copenhagen. And is a well-known guy in Danish chess and a friendly fellow with a great sense of humor, by the way. And the point here is that it would be nice to have some marks. Well, they used to navigate by the stars when they were like the Vikings. They would look up and they say, okay, the Sirius is in that position, then we would head that way. And okay, now Sirius is in that way. Oh no, not so good. Let's turn back or something. And of course, at some point when you have played these kind of structures several times, you have more of an idea how to play them, and this is the way to go if you want to improve in complicated structures, is simply to play a lot of games and study a lot of games. And by the way, that's how I learned positional chess, is basically by looking at games by great players, like this game. They are both close to 2700 in strength and playing understanding, which is also important. Some people are very good practitioner, but understanding chess is also interesting. And this is a common opening, the Nimso Indian with a set. And this line is also a well-known variation. Knight f3 is, I think the idea behind this is, if you go this d5 here, you will go transpose into the Ragosian. And I think Grandelius actually does play the Ragosian, so I was a little bit surprised that he plays b6 here. And e3. And so we have the fianchetto variation. And d5 before bishop b7 is now the main line, because Black wants to play the bishop to this square and exchange this great fellow down here. Another line, of course, could be something like this and here, and c5. This is interesting, and I think the main line is to go knight a4. And this is, by the way, an interesting position where you should probably take. And here, I think this is interesting. This is just a sideline. This is very dynamically complex. Oops, don't take that one. And I think after something like new variation, like this is very interesting position. By the way, I think this was all in Ivan Sokolov's book. But that's a whole different line. We're gonna focus on the main game, which is d5. And I usually take this. And of course, it would make not much sense if the pawn was not here to take on d5. Well, sometimes white does that as well, but then he usually put his knight on this square here, so he's able to build a center in a position without the pawn on b6. This would not make much sense because this is a Carlsbad structure, but with the bishop on this ridiculous square. So the bishop is not outside being a strong bishop, is inside being a bad bishop. Okay. But with this pawn here, Black's structure on the queen side will mean that white will always get something to bite on. It's not, if you look at the structure after b6, it's not possible not to have a weak pawn on the queen side. It's simply doesn't matter how you set up the pawns, it's not possible. But with the pawn on b7 and you play c6, you will have a great structure that it's easy to defend the pawn on b7 and a7, and they are not structurally weak. That was a little bit. And c5 attacking the center, and knight e5 is also a common idea to set up this f4 Stonewall / Fillsbury attack. And here black plays an interesting move. He takes on c3 completely unprovoked to play bishop a6. And what is the idea behind bishop a6? That's very obvious. He wants to exchange this bishop. Why do you want to exchange this bishop? Because this bishop here is white's good bishop. It controls the white squares in the center. It attacks down on h7, which is where white dreams of course, is to launch an attack on the white squares. But it's also controlling a lot of important squares. You can just you don't even have to discuss it. You can just look at the bishop and say, that's a good bishop. It's a nice bishop. It has a good potential. A lot of things have to go wrong for this not to be able to do something. So it makes a lot of sense to exchange this bishop. And by the way, when it is exchanged, a lot of white's attacking chances disappears, but it still does have some attacking chances. Okay, let's sum up the pawn structure, because that's rather interesting. We see that white is missing the b pawn and black is missing the e pawn. What does that mean? That means that black has a majority on the queen side. That is a pawn more. So in an ending, that pawn might turn into a pass pawn, that might turn into a queen. On the other hand, white has an extra central pawn, and if he's able to utilize that to press the pawns forward, he will have a big advantage, and that might often translate into sort of a dominating position in the center or a kingside attack. So these are the scenarios we are looking into. We also see that white has this bishop down here, and if I was white, I would be a little bit worried about this bishop, because at the moment it does not look that good. On the other hand, it could be good one day somewhere, because most bishops can be good somewhere if they are allowed to get out. But at the moment, it is kind of in danger of being unemployed. And one of black's main strategic ideas here is to play around this bishop, so to make it sort of unimportant for the rest of the game. Queen a4, knight c7. Queen a4 is just attacking, but also there's some white squares, maybe. But the knight is happy to, it might go here where it will pressurize here, and thereby making this much more difficult to achieve this f3, e4. We can also see that it's not easy for white to achieve this. a6, getting more pawns on support on the queen side. I'm not sure what the actual point of this is, but maybe black is preparing b5, maybe he's preparing knight b5, and maybe the knight can go here. And we already know this from the Carlsbad, that a knight here is often very good, unless of course white can steamroll it with the e pawn. Bishop d2, simply developing, connecting the rooks, and protecting the pawn here. Knight b5. So that was the idea, getting the pieces out. And by the way, black's position at the moment looks kind of harmonious. Queen b3, putting pressure here, putting pressure here, getting ready to play maybe a4 to soften white's queen side. Knight d6, that was the idea all along. Bishop e1, and we see that white is starting the plan to make this bishop better. So it might go here and put an awkward pin on this one. And by the way, also threatening to take here, because there is this little trick here. So that's a threat. c4. Now that's a very comitical decision to make. Why is white doing that? Black doing that? Well, he's making his majority sure that it will be felt probably on the queen side. So it's a nice move, but it's also dangerous move, because if white will ever get this in, then there will be no pressure on white's center. So this pawn here is no longer in any danger. It's solidly protected by the c-pawn. So I'm always a bit nervous when I play moves like c4, but it also releases sort of the tension on the queen side, which was sort of slightly annoying because the bishop might come out and annoy the knights and so on. And getting an extra move, and queen b1, and we see that and this is, by the way, I think Howell, who's white, is playing very strong chess here. He's eyeing this square, so he's preparing this move, maybe in combination with this. He's also preventing knight d5. Here, black makes an instructive mistake, I think. That he should start to maybe play something like queen c7 or something. The idea is he has to keep his structure. He has to have this option sometimes and be able to sort of control the position. The way he plays it, he plays knight fe8, and I'm not sure I like this move because the knight was very strong here, and it would be nicer to get this bishop here where it's not doing much. I'm making a lot of mistakes here. Before having to move the knight, so just moving the queen and then moving the knight would make a much more make white's position much more clumsy, and also maybe later on it would get hit by this move. The idea is to get rid of this knight here, but it could wait. Of course, you're not going to play this move because then the knight will sit forever. But a4 is a strong move, preventing b5. So to not make this structure go forward in a nice fashion. But it does make sure that black will get a passed pawn on the queen side in the future. f6. Okay, it makes sense, but it's also making this knight a little bit clumsy on e8. But he is kicking the knight. I am a little bit worried, and this is the thing is, black is weakening his position, and he's not really getting anything in return at the moment. So you should try to stay as flexible as possible. And also you have to be, when you're having this kind of structure, you have to be very opportunistic as a black player. You simply have to be ready for a lot of stuff. By the way, the bishop here is better here than it would be everywhere else, because it could be attacked on these squares. And here, this was black's idea to make a passed pawn. But this passed pawn is a weakness. It's not a strong passed pawn. It's a weakness, and it's something that white can attack. The question is, can black manage to get some counterplay before white sort of get going with the e-pawn or all the pieces. Bishop d3, nice move, and we knew that this was sort of white's Achilles heel, this bishop that might not get into the game, and queen c2, and he keeps it on the white squares. Queen e7 looks very natural, is of course not going into any pin and attacking this pawn here, and more or less forcing this move, and it was en route to the b file, and of course black is dreaming of this move, and here white plays very well, rook a2, defending the pawn, and by the way, black is getting outplayed here. White has complete control. There's a weakness here, and there is this move is coming at some point. Like this, and that would be pretty nasty for black. Also, the knights are covering each other, which is seldom very good. So this bishop here, they'll make that yellow, is sort of dominating both knights. Rook b3, but there is also something here to attack, but it doesn't work anyway. Rook e8, and white has managed to regroup nicely. He's getting ready to win the pawn, and without allowing any counterplay. And here black badly miscalculates, queen e7, saying, okay, the b file, there's nothing to see there, but maybe I can make some discomfort, and I'm threatening this move here. But he didn't calculate far enough. Black took, white took, check. And here is a very important moment, because if for instance white plays something like this, he'd probably still be better, but it will be a mess. It will be a mess after something like this, because this one is hanging, okay, this one is hanging. They are not that great, but it's not completely certain what's going on here. But white has an intermediate move that changes everything, and that's here. Now this is a very nice move, and you won't grasp it immediately, but the thing is, due to this discomfort here, white managed. And by the way to think here is to remember, I have to energize my pieces. I have to energize my pieces. I have to make them active. They have to do something, and I will, if I can avoid going backwards, or if I can avoid making any concessions, I will avoid making any concessions. By the way, there is a beautiful line here, and that's partly why I took this game to show you. Also, it's a recent game, it's a nice game, but the Grandelius' win, the game prior to this one in an Italian game, was even prettier. But this is much more instructive, I think. Knight b7 is more or less forced. The thing is, after rook a7, if black goes here, which is a natural move, keeping the pressure on here, and I'm sure that Grandelius had prepared that, okay, I play h5 and he play rook a7, I'm just going to play queen e6. And then he saw this move. And you have to take back. You can't take back with the queen, then there's no threat here. So you have to take back with a knight. And another intermediate move that is very unpleasant, queen e7. And something like knight f7 is not helping due to knight h6, check. So but okay, so you can just go here, right? What's the problem? Of course this one is hanging, but this is one that's also hanging, and this might be hanging, and the thing is that here white has this fantastic move. You have to take. It comes here, check. And comes knight f5, and you can't cover this pawn. And you don't. If you had a check on g1, but you don't. You only have a check on a1. Then it will help, because here this one is of course the very nice finish. It's a checkmate, but also the mate is also coming here, and the check is here. But after this, black is coming out, and you would love to give checks on these squares, but it's not possible, which is kind of pretty, I think. So that's winning for black. So queen e6 does not work due to this line, and of course f6 falls if the queen goes. So that's just winning. So knight b7, knight f2. And he does get it, but this does not inspire confidence. And here you have this move that is very unpleasant, hitting this one and hitting this one, and we see that black is lacking in coordination. And by the way, that's a very important thing in asymmetrical pawn structure. A very important thing in asymmetrical pawn structure is to try to get your own piece to coordinate well and destroy the opponent's coordination. And even at the cost of material, just for instance, getting the pawns rolling in the center is much more important than keeping the a pawn, for instance. We have seen an earlier game, Bot Wenig Aljechen, which was a prime example of that. But in general, this is how to think. So get your own coordination together and destroy the opponent's coordination. And here it all falls completely apart for black. By the way, please notice there is a threat here, check rook c1, and that would be embarrassing. But there is a little nice move here that helps with everything. Notice that this one is hanging, and white has complete control. There's nothing bad happening. So just h4, giving the king here a safe square, and white is winning now. There's no way black can get the coordination. And by the way, you can also see that the pieces are just coming. It's gonna be king h2, and then it's gonna be knight e4, and it's gonna be very bad for black. And this time he didn't even have to have king e2 and covering the pawn, and knight c5. There's this pin here, rook b2. And Grandelius is a nice, strong tactician who's always trying to get something going here. Likes activity, and if he just could get that queen into the game, but he cannot. Rook e1. So this is a problem, and this is a problem, and this is a problem, and everything is bad. Actually, everything is bad here. So black is losing a piece no matter what he does, and therefore he resigned the game. A great game by Howell, and a good example of how to play in asymmetrical structures, keeping flexible, trying to get coordination, trying to destroy the opponent's coordination is key points. And by the way, these positions are very difficult to play, and sometimes you can lose without knowing where you made the mistake, because it was not obvious that like a move like this, which the computer, by the way, doesn't like, so that's why I didn't like it either. I only checked a little bit with the computer, and it didn't like this move. It preferred a more flexible approach, and it's interesting that you can that these positions are so difficult to play that something like this just to prefer this, and white is already clearly better, but black was probably better in this position according to the computer. At least I had a nice game. So it's very difficult to play, and it can be frustrating when you don't know why you lose. It can be it's annoying, like I just lost and I don't know why. Usually when you lose, you made a mistake, and it's clear that it was a mistake. But here it's, well, of course, black must have made some mistakes and so on. But this position is just totally awful, and he's only gonna last 6 more moves. Is maybe a little bit surprising, but of course something like this is always dangerous. Anyways, this was DM Talks. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and remember to like and subscribe, and most important of all, tell your friends about DM Talks. We need viewers. Thank you.